I am a dungeon master most of the time, and I love it, but I also like to play sometimes. So I found an online DM looking for players for a grim, dark adventure. My first issue with the dungeon master was that he never let us stay long anywhere. There was always some threat for us to deal with. We never had an opportunity to fully explore rooms or roleplay properly. I felt targeted at some points too, maybe because I was the only woman at the table, but he was always giving me low experience because I wasn't roleplaying enough or the way he expected me to. I was playing a half-elven bard, and there were signals from an elf NPC that they wanted to romance me, which I did not want. I voiced it to the dungeon master at the table, and the dungeon master hinted that I could be forced into it, which should have been a red flag. Also, there was some constant mention of grapes. Yeah, grapes during dialogue, which I thought was to add to the dark theme. One time, we went through a monster city. My player character was trying to locate her adoptive mother that was kidnapped while I was in the session, and while interrogating a harpy with hag vibes at a tavern, another player interrupts my conversation to give grapes to the harpy. Yeah, giving grapes to the harpy. And the dungeon master proceeds to moan. As if the harpy was enjoying it. There was silence at the table for some minutes. It was totally uncalled for and did not help anything. One of the players, Fighter, called this out because the grape-giving player was laughing the whole time as though this was super fun while everyone else at the table was uncomfortable. A few weeks later, after not showing up to session, Fighter dropped out for personal reasons. Our group chat died, and we never played again. And to be honest, I was very happy to not have to drop out myself. The part of RPG horror stories that often goes untold. Not necessarily the bit about leaving the group chat, but the bit where people try and get you back into the group chat. Ugh. Horrible. But luckily, I don't think that happened here, right? Hey there, it's my first ever time sending something. I'm not sure if it qualifies as a horror story since it only lasted a few sessions. Also, English is not my first language, so apologies for any mistakes. Anyway, on to the story. I'm relatively new to tabletop role-playing games in general, as most tables I played in never went past session 1. So as you can guess, I'm pretty inexperienced and I don't try to hide it. My first actual campaign was a Call of Cthulhu one, set in the early 20s with very few technological advancements. Think surveillance cameras, television, etc. The characters are as follows. The Dungeon Master, my ex, the actual horror of the story, and an overall crappy person. Me, super new to tabletop role-playing games at the time. This was 5 or so years ago. I was playing a 40-something-year-old Italian forensic coroner. Smokey was the Dungeon Master's best friend, playing a dumb jock-type Russian spy that smoked a comically large amount of cigars. Red, who joined later, worked with me and the Dungeon Master on our side job, playing a quirky mechanic lady. I guess by saying the DM is my ex now, I gave away where this is going, but the dude was awful. He was a new Dungeon Master, I think, but kind of wanted us all to be expert players. Also, he acted like he had been DMing for a year, so I honestly don't know what to think on that part. Huh, the reverse Matt Mercer effect. Been a long road, but Mike is right in front of you, man. Daggers in your hands. We kill this guy, we avenge your father. You ready? Yeah. This has been a long time coming. Can't say I'm not looking forward to it. Today, Micah gets his due. Oh, cut, God. Cut? This isn't a movie set, man. What are you talking about? This is subpar roleplay at best. If this were Critical Role, you guys would be torn apart by the comment section. I mean, seriously, what are you even doing? Subpar? Critical Role? Dude, we've been playing for like a couple months. Laura Bailey, Liam O'Brien, these are the sort of people you need to be learning from. I have certain expectations when it comes to this game. God, your expectations are bogus. Can we just roll the sneak attack and keep on with the game? Fine, sure. How's sneak attack work again? Dude, we've been over this! Since my character was a local city's coroner, the Dungeon Master decided she would be the starting point for the main questline. Sounds great, right? Sure, but he did that by making my characters the joke of the entire town. I wish I was being dramatic. The main story, and my personal hell, started with a body going missing from the autopsy room. No clue where it went since my character was apparently the only one responsible for the place. The whole thing was framed as her fault. The Dungeon Master proceeded to narrate an entire newspaper article where my character talked to the local news that it was just like the dead body had walked away. I, as a player, was not aware of any of this. From this moment on, everything goes downhill. My character, which was a diplomacy-oriented character, mind you, could not interact with a single NPC in town without having them say something about the missing body, laughing at her face, and then dismissing anything she had to say afterwards, leaving Smokey, the bulky barbarian type, to do social interactions, which proceeded to either fail or turn into a streak of repetitive intimidation scenes. Later on, when Red showed up for the first session, one of the first things she does is laughing really loud, both in-game and in real life, talking about this dead body again. The Dungeon Master briefed her about the whole thing just to make this joke even bigger. Now imagine a new player trying to make a diplomacy-oriented character, having to ask for help on mechanics every step of the way, just being the town's laughingstock from the get-go without any of their say in it. This was hell. Even more hellish was when I started to notice the other player characters were not getting this harsh treatment. Smokey was always pulling dumb stuff, like he shot the Corbett's house electric box because a light flickered, and getting out of it mostly scot-free, except when it affected my character. Like, for example, he always did great on intimidation, but the one time he did it to try and help me, my character got fired. And Red was like this beloved mechanic lady who everyone drank with and never faced any prejudice for having a masculine presentation and job in the 20s. Mind you, when I said my character would be a lesbian, the Dungeon Master told me to hide it at all costs at risks of going to jail. This whole experience was just so nuts that the next character I actually played was a barbarian in Curse of Strahd because I was convinced I just couldn't play a social character as a newbie. This was the bigger part of the weird bullying the Dungeon Master did to me, but I'll just add on some other stuff this DM did just to make it fun. He demanded every single interaction be in character. The players could never debate amongst themselves what would be the next move, or the Dungeon Master would say, "You know random NPC number 3? Heard that, right?" He banned me from making any comments about possible historical inconsistencies on his hyper-realistic setting because it made it look like I was trying to interfere with his DMing. Like I just said, racism was still a thing in the 20s around the US. In the 20s? Just around the US. He made investigation clues open and said we could go anywhere to investigate the clue, then got mad when we didn't go to the place he wanted us to go. Said I should know all technical terms my character would use to explain something, and if I made one up, he would just make me try to persuade the NPC because you're lying, and you should have made your character know the stuff that you know in real life.
What is this part of the ship called again?
Yes, this is the bow.
The bow.
That's actually wrong, you idiot. He gave us a huge anagram to solve, refused to give any clues or hints, then proceeded to be mad that we took so long, and made it so that we had to spend so long deciphering the thing in-game that it was a nightmare that we just couldn't investigate anything in general. On Red's first and only session, Smokey couldn't play, so he said he wouldn't mind his character just being like in the background. Then the Dungeon Master proceeded to blow up the office that my character and Smokey shared, said it was too hot for my character to go in, and then straight up scolded me for not caring about Smokey's well-being and forgetting about him so fast. So TLDR, the Dungeon Master makes the newbie the town's fool without their consent, making it impossible for them to play the character as intended, then proceeds to be an overall douche. The most insane part, this game only lasted about 5 sessions. What are you on? The most insane part is that this dude is your partner! I want to make this clear. This behavior is bad, no matter who you're doing it to, but if you do this to your romantic partner, what is wrong with you? This Dungeon Master is condescending as all hell, and in general, very not great at their job. Call of Cthulhu is a more roleplay heavy game. Discouraging the kind of roleplay that this player is doing is kind of counterintuitive, because how else are you supposed to play a game like Call of Cthulhu? Hell, in Dungeons & Dragons, a game with a lot of combat, this would be ridiculous. Especially since, and I think I have a tab pointing it out, a lot of new players tend to not veer towards roleplay, because roleplaying can be sort of opaque when you're first getting into the hobby, but this person jumped right into it, and the DM discouraged it actively. In fact, this dude is just straight up bullying their partner for playing the game. Man, I'm not even getting into all the other stuff listed at the end. All in all, this Dungeon Master is not good at being a DM or at being a partner. We had a hangout day in our current session as 3 players could not make it. We shared our best/worst horror and wholesome stories. This one in particular stuck out to me, and I got permission from the player to share it. They were running a sort of homebrew world. The adventurers all went to a kind of magic school. Let's just call it Pig Pimple's Academy of Questing and Exploration. Anyway, to the point. The DM started to pursue the cleric with a god she didn't follow. After about 2 sessions of whispers and dreams, the god manifested to her, asking her to renounce her current deity and worship him instead. He promised her more power if she not only accepted but agreed to bear his child and bring it into the world. They were aware that certain adult situations like this were a possibility. She refused outright, stating that she liked her current god like a father and would never betray him for something so selfish. Over the course of 4 more sessions, the Dungeon Master relentlessly pursued her, making offerings, promising spells, magic items, and even a dragon familiar. This would occur every single long rest. Every NPC, quest giver, every inn, every villain seemed to be in some way connected to this god. Minor Baldur's Gate spoilers, but it reminds me of when that creepy squid guy was trying to seduce my girl Reyna. She belongs to Shadowheart, dang it! Thanks, Lizzo. Oh, anyway. Some would beg her to take the offer, and others would demand or threaten. Session 10 is where everything finally derailed. Without warning, the Dungeon Master told the party that the cleric had been engulfed in an azure wisp of smoke and left the... I thought that said panties for a second, and that shows how much this job has corrupted my poor asexual ass. Anyway, she left the party's current plane of existence. He then explained to the cleric that she found herself in an opulent bedroom adorned with riches, art, etc. The god manifested before her, proclaimed that he had been patient enough, and motioned for her to join him in his chambers, and said, "Well, I am quite annoyed. You made me wait this long. Just to show I'm still a benevolent god, I shall still award you all I promised, as long as you don't disappoint me further." The cleric just laughed, collected her dice, and explained to the rest of the party that she was leaving the campaign. The Dungeon Master threatened to have her character killed if she did, and before leaving, she only replied, "Do whatever you want. I can't stop you here, but you can't stop me anywhere else." Yes, at long last, I have achieved harmony and glorious marriage. I am God of this world, and nothing later can stop me. What? Hello? Hello? What? Mom, you don't need to call me. We're in the same house. She was later told by the bard that immediately upon her leaving, the Dungeon Master had a straight-up meltdown. He ended the session and told the party that upon the next session, he expected everyone would come to an understanding that his word is law in this world. According to the bard, only the ranger showed up. I do love a happy ending. Just remember, everybody, if you ever find yourself in a situation like this, or any other uncomfortable situation brought on by a Dungeon Master or a player character, it's okay to move on. Yes, that world belongs to the Dungeon Master, and it's true, they can do whatever they want there. Just remind yourself that they only have power over that world. There's no threat they can make to your character that will follow you outside of it. Take your character and move along, and remind yourself that that world simply doesn't exist. Nothing happened. The DM is not powerful. No DM is all powerful. What good is the power of a god if there's no one to follow you? The most reasonable person we've ever seen. But I do understand. I understand why people stay in games with crappy Dungeon Masters or crappy players. There's the social web, there's anxiety, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, even with all of those factors, there is always one solution to the problems that you face at any D&D or TTRPG or most life problems. Sometimes the solution is to isolate, separate, remind yourself that you have boundaries and that those need to be respected. This cleric saw the direction of this game. She saw where it was going and saw it was not a place she wanted to go and moved along. And you know what the best part is? The other players did the same. A lot of people feel alone in the problems that they see in the people around them, but sometimes all it takes is somebody pointing out, hey, this is messed up, for everyone else to just do the reasonable thing and walk away. So So at the time of this miss, I was in a campaign that a former fellow player invited me to. Said campaign was on hiatus due to in-real-life shenanigans. But, slight problem. I had recently started at my now regular part-time job at a local bar, meaning my Sundays were being occupied by work. So, looking for my Dungeons & Dragons fix, I decided to go fishing over on r/LFG for a game so that I could play during the week. Man, haven't played D&D in a while. r/LFG killed my family and made me stub my tongue. Yeah, it'll be fine. And I came across what should have been my ideal game. A game taking place in GMT, my time zone, on Tuesdays, and early enough for me too. It was great. So I opened the post to see more details, and some red flags started showing up. The first one being that the Dungeon Master said they were having trouble finding players. I've put up ads looking for players on r/LFG before. They get flooded with responses almost immediately. That is a problem that a Dungeon Master on here really shouldn't have with the right attitude. Well, I naively thought to myself, this subreddit gets pretty busy, so that's kind of understandable. So I keep going. Red flag number 2. The Dungeon Master mentioned in their post that they don't want tourists in their game. Tourists being new players? Okay, major gatekeeping there, my guy. I've DM'd for new players before. They're not tourists. I imagine the Dungeon Master was using it as some kind of slang for casuals. A lot of them are super excited to play the game and generally bring a lot of enthusiasm and interest to the table. So this set off yet another alarm bell in my brain. I've read horror stories about people like this before, albeit cautiously. I decided to go a little bit further and check out the Google form. It was mostly bog standard stuff for Dungeons & Dragons form, name, game preference, character concept, etc, etc, etc. That is, until I reached the very end. Final question, slap bang before the submit button. Are you an a-hole? Now, I generally try to give the benefit of the doubt to people, but this, coupled with the fact that we're having issues holding down players and that tourist comment, the Dungeon Master had hit strike 3 for me. I got a pretty good idea as to why they were having problem players. Projection and blame shifting to the nth degree was the vibe I was getting. I decided to save myself this D&D horror story waiting to happen and got out of there. Dude did a full psychoanalysis. And got it right, too! After all, no D&D is better than bad D&D. I have nothing but immense pity for whatever poor souls ended up at this Dungeon Master's table. Okay, I know I made a joke about LFG being equivalent to a war zone, but it isn't really that bad. I actually use LFG a lot, both for video games, and occasionally I look through it for Dungeons & Dragons. And you know what? It can be great. However, of course, when you're playing with random people, it can also be bad. You're flipping the good old trust coin. But look, as we've seen from hundreds of horror stories, when you're playing with people you're familiar with, it can also go poorly. It's not necessarily that you're playing with random people, it's just that you're playing with people. Add the human factor into anything and it just gets really complicated. As a guy with countless Destiny 2 and World of Warcraft LFG horror stories, I can tell you that you just need to remember that you can walk away. Or you can do what this guy did and take a look at the posts in advance. Yeah, maybe this is jumping into the what is true dimension, but at the end of the day, what are you really risking? There's plenty of games out there and always greener fields on the other side. Also, DMs making posts. If you add gatekeeping language to your posts, you're not gonna get many players, and that's your fault. So this tale is only one chapter in the 500-page novel that is my friendship with this guy. Let's just call him Cockroach, because he is an invasive pest that won't stop being annoying no matter how much you stomp him down. For context, I'm a trans male to female woman in my late teens, and he is precisely 1 year younger than me. This takes place when everyone involved is underage, mind you. Just know that I could write a million horror stories about Cockroach. But that's not the point of this story. It was summertime and I was on vacation. I had previously not played D&D with Cockroach and another friend of mine, this time an actual great person, let's call her Truss. Now Truss is a great person in and out of the game and really gets into character despite being new to the game. Everyone except I was new. Cockroach, on the other hand, was quite the creepy individual even in-game and showed major signs of edgelord behavior. It is important to note that I'm not entirely innocent, as I did comply with his wishes to get a romanceable NPC in both campaigns, but I did make compromises, and for everyone screaming, just go no contact already at their monitors, I am sorry to inform you that abusive friendships and relationships are way hard to break free from than an outsider would think. Pre-game prep red flags were numerous as well, but as we say in Germany, sometimes the trees are too numerous to stop you from seeing the forest in front of you. I have luckily learned from this. First off, my campaign was a steampunk sky pirate escapade where the players ride wyverns through the skies to plunder airships. Sounds cool, right? Well, Cockroach managed to ruin everything via character creation. He wanted a magical arm, a plant-infected arm that I gave some homebrew ruling to, where every turn in combat he'd take damage but deal slightly more damage in turn. When I asked him how he wanted his wyvern to look, he said he wanted it to look like the Yu-Gi-Oh card Black Rose Dragon. Of course, being a Yu-Gi-Oh nerd myself, I knew that card and knew it wouldn't work in my setting. I don't see why it wouldn't, but alright. Anyway, we settled on a black wyvern with a flower crown made of roses. But then he asked if his wyvern could turn into... Whoa! Whoa! Dude was down bad for Akiza. Oh my god. Yeah, I watched Yu-Gi-Oh, okay? Doesn't mean I'll understand your anime references, okay? Calm down. I told him since wyverns in this world are about as smart as a horse, that would be bad. Yeah, he still makes jokes at the table about how he wanted to do this, but I would not allow him. Also, he wanted his character to be his IRL age, but of course, I didn't think underage sky pirates were all that logical, plus the rest of the characters in the initial party were at least in their late 20s, so I settled on him just being 18. I also had to stop him from making his character chaotic evil multiple times, and had to explain to him that this is a good aligned campaign. I even tried some basic empathy training, i.e. hypothetically, an NPC comes to you and insults you on your arm. I stab him. You're chaotic neutral. You can't just stab people. I cut off his ear. And so on and so forth until I just gave up. But on the bright side, Trust had an amazing character. She was playing a tiefling ex-inquisitor who quit due to bad pay and lost an arm in the process, replacing it with a mechanical prosthetic. She also had a connection with a character I was hyping up as a support DMPC named Doug. Doug, the Dragonborn Paladin, was like a father to her. Yes, our campaign was not very serious, but apparently too serious for the flower dragon. Justice for Akiza, she needed more screen time. That has nothing to do with, okay. Now, I know these are some massive red flags, but call it morbid curiosity, desperation to play D&D, or just simply being the victim of gaslighting and emotional manipulation, I still complied. So the game begins with the players flying on their wyverns onto the ship that is said to hide great treasures. They convinced the ship's guards that they were guests of the ship's captain, Mark Brown. So they went to his cockpit. I had planned for them to go into the cellar to find the treasure, but whatever. More fun improvised roleplay. Trust tried being friendly with the Captain Mark, but rolled relatively low in her charisma rolls, so he thought she was flirting with him really awkwardly and just stared at her in confusion. We made a joke about how Trust likes older daddies, and then we moved on. Until now, it's been pretty good and fun. Cockroach had been very complacent with the story, and we had some fun character moments. On the way down, Doug basically said something along the lines of, "You're young, don't you think you guys should be doing a little bit more than raiding airships? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, foreshadowing." So they get to the cellar and bust down the door, finding a woman? Yeah, remember how Cockroach wanted a romanceable NPC? This is her, the daughter of a recently assassinated Archduke who was being taken to be sold to slavers for insane profits. Now, I told Cockroach the NPC, let's call her May 2, would not get in a relationship with anyone who is morally bankrupt, i.e. kills without reason, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, has violent tendencies, side-eye, or does things without justification. Can I make it any more obvious? In addition, I said many times that actions will have consequences, and if you jump off a 10-story building, you will take fall damage and most likely die. So what does Cockroach do? He immediately asserts his supreme control over everyone by basically saying Meitei, Mai Tai, whatever, is his and only his, and anyone who dares touch her will face his wrath. Mai too was unamused by this, but there was no time to discuss it as Mark Brown walks in the room and combat starts. To show his strength, he kills Doug, the DMPC, in a single turn, and the players only managed to escape because Doug spewed fire before he died to make a hole in the airship, and the players used their wyverns to escape, now going to a major city for shelter. Now, they arrive in the city and are told by a military general that they need to help find a missing inventor because they need her blueprints for the ship so they can find its weakness in the ongoing battle. The party, however, decides to rest at Mai 2's mansion. Is this a good time to mention that Cockroach was romancing this character because he couldn't separate player from character, causing him to think this was giving him a shot with me, IRL? Well, this leads to him wanting to sleep in the same room as Mai 2, where I was able to flex my elite cock-blocking skills. First off, he rolled low. A natural 2, if I remember correctly, which means she basically said, "Sure, go sleep on the floor then. I'm sure we have a mattress here somewhere." However, he did not like that, so he said, "No, I sleep on the bed." So she replied, "Okay, then I'll sleep on the mattress." In the end, he settled on sleeping on the floor, but apparently he thought it was smart to sneak into her bed while she was sleeping. The next day, I played my 2 was a little bit more afraid of Cockroach, only amplified when Trust was talking to an NPC over their shared interest of guitars, only for Cockroach to grab the NPC by the throat with his plant arm for being a trespasser. No, he was a guest as he played for the indoor band, but I guess Cockroach just didn't care. Upon seeing this man she thought would protect him choking out another innocent person, my 2 ran out and got out of there, rushing outside the mansion and calling the guards. Cockroach followed her immediately and without hesitation grabbed her by the neck with his plant arm and tried to choke her to death, citing some "if I can have her, nobody can" nonsense. Then 6 guards came. 6 guards against 1 level 1 fighter. Do the math. He got knocked out and arrested. This meant I had to end the session and also cancel the campaign because Cockroach had derailed it so hard, it's not even funny. About an hour later, he called me and told me how he was so happy that he could finally be pure evil for once. And I told him my frustrations, i.e., this is not an evil campaign. You did not listen to my pointers at all. What the heck is wrong with you? But he ignored all of that to laugh at how short his prison sentence was. Wait, short prison sentence? Didn't he murder someone?
You have committed heinous crimes. You have killed without provocation or reason. And for this, you must be punished. I hereby sentence you to a week of community service.
Wait, really?
May the gods have mercy upon your soul.
1 week later.
Die! Die! Yes! Who could have prevented this?
And to ask when the next session was, even when I told him it was canceled an hour ago. Now, before you ask about Trust, she was oblivious to the terrible stuff going on and even thought it was funny. Even to this day, we still joke about it. To recap, I want to say that I know I did a lot of things wrong, but I was an emotionally vulnerable, dumb teenager who still thought Cockroach had some good in him. I had never met anyone like him before now, and now, almost a year after going... Oh, wait, no contact. Sorry, I didn't know people abbreviated that. I am so much better having adopted a zero-tolerance policy for BS or problem behavior, not only in D&D, but life in general. And before you say it, yeah... we did have a session 0. We had it over text, but we still had it. Trust was fine with some risque topics. We were hormonal teens after all, but I always stated that graphic content was a no-go, and we live by the fade to black rules around these parts. Teen stories. You know them, you love them. It's obvious that sometimes when you're playing with teenagers, social situations are just not gonna be navigated with the most grace. Of course, that's no excuse for behavior like Cockroach's, who is acting like an absolute fool. I probably did the skit on this, but playing evil characters is cool. Playing in evil campaigns is cool. But the reason to do one is to have fun with everybody, not just with yourself and your dream waifu. Speaking of, giving this guy that NPC love interest was probably a bad idea. I think giving people NPC love interest on requests is an interesting concept. I would prefer it arise more naturally throughout the campaign based on the character. However, it is a good way to make sure the characters have compatibility, working with the player to ensure that they match. I think the biggest red flag that this wasn't going to work was that you needed to change the character. But I can fix him is not a winning dating strategy for anyone, NPC or otherwise. I think that's a wrap. For those who have not noticed, we have been changing the look of RPG horror stories. Last Friday, I did kind of miss the mark. It was really hard to read, but I think I've fixed that here. I'm really happy with how this text format has turned out, but critique is still absolutely welcome. Let me know so that we can make this even more of an aesthetically pleasing tavern experience. But anyway, if you enjoyed the stories themselves, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our RPG Horror Story Marathon. Our latest one is linked in the cards. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment wannabe Yandere to let me know you made it to the end of the episode. Hey, by the way, if you guys have your own horror stories, you can send them directly to us. There's an email in the description. Send your stories our way for a chance to be featured in one of these videos. But hey, even if you don't have any stories, in essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.
Yes! Yes! Oh god, did I break something?
Yeah, later. Later.